Hey there, this is your Punctibyte for the second week of September, and I hope that everybody had a great weekend. I certainly did. I spent a majority of it working on a grant proposal to help sustain the microbiology capstone course, but I got away for a short bit very early this morning to do a triathlon in Fort Collins, and that was wicked fun. I'd like to kick things off today by talking to you a little bit about one of the features on your TACD, and that is the publications folder. So I'm going to go ahead and flip to the TACD and show this off just a bit. So you'll see a folder that is called Publications on here. And if you click on that, there's a lot of fun corresponding publications that go with different lectures. But I actually wanted to go ahead and pull up the one called The Gram Stain Mechanism. And I love this article because it reviews the gram stain after more than a century since its discovery. This article was written in 1996, and it mentions that, until very recently, we didn't understand the mechanism of gram staining. So it goes through this mechanism relating that, in fact, the thickness of the gram-positive cell wall is really what maintains that crystal violet iodine complex. And there's even a cheesy figure down here. Well, it's a great figure of the structure of crystal violet. But then if you go a little further down, there's a cheesy figure showing the difference between the gram-positive and the gram-negative cell, noting that thick peptidoglycan layer in the gram-positive cell is really responsible for maintaining the complex. And this is in the gram negative, which you see in B on the right. It gets disintegrated by the alcohol treatment, and that allows for the escape of the diiodine complex. So I encourage you to go ahead and review this article, just as I do with many of the lectures, to go outside the box and really think about how you might enhance your lecture by gaining a little bit of sexy mindedness to go behind what it is that you're talking to the students about. That being said, let's talk about what we are going to cover this week and look at the Lab 3 and 4 TA guidelines. But before we do that, just a note that Tara and Kyle and Aaron will be responsible for Open Lab on Friday, so either coming or getting someone to cover you. We'll cover Lab 3 on Tuesday and then Lab 4 on Thursday. And so, of course, Lab 3 is the gram stain, and we'll want to assign the gram stain report on that day. But a quick note on due date: because we have our first lecture exam on the 17th, we would normally have the gram stain be due on that day, but I think that's unfair to the students, so I would propose that we push that off until the 19th. So when we announce that due date, let's go ahead and announce that it will be on the 19th. So that being said, let's take a minute to look at the TA guidelines for Lab 3 and Lab 4 and look at some of the nuances and things to remember there. And then I'll try to wrap things up by showing you a few new tricks that I've learned on Canvas. So let's pull up our TA guidelines. Couple of quick things to note for Lab 3. You're going to want to, again, assign the gram stain report, but also you may want to remind the students of the importance of citation and start to get them thinking about this. If you would like to direct them to my website, where under additional information on the lecture side, they'll find some generalized citation guidelines that may be helpful. I also wanted to note, when giving the lecture for the gram stain, I have a couple of visuals that I can gladly bring with me to the lab that are of the gram positive and gram negative cell walls. We will likely cover this in lecture on Monday. However, I don't know if I will finish the coverage of the cell wall structure. So please don't assume that students are utterly knowledgeable already. Take time to slow down and really cover the structure. It is for many of them, if anything, it may be the second time that they've actually seen this, but it could potentially not even be the second time because I may not finish it entirely tomorrow in lecture. So make sure to point out all of the nuances, teichoic, lipoteichoic acids and gram positives versus the lipopolysaccharide and gram negatives, the differences in peptidoglycan thickness, location, periplasmic space, and whatnot that you would summarize between the two. Let's go ahead and just make a couple of notes on the staining procedure. I usually like to put the come in and stain on the board so that they can remember that as a mnemonic to help them with the process of gram staining, and to recognize then that I've put some background information about not only the gram stain but also the acid-fast stain, which they'll be performing on the same day. This is helpful background for the lecture because it just gives you a few interesting things to talk about. For example, the history of consumption and just even now the current issues with tuberculosis is something that you might add and interlace into your discussion on mycobacterium and the acid-fast stain. Please do remind the students that they need to perform both a gram stain and an acid-fast stain on their unknowns. So it's a big staining day, another big staining day for them. Now on the flip side, during lab 4, this is not near as large of a lab day, and that means that there may be time during Thursday's lab for them to go back to some of the earlier stains that I know some of them were unable to finish. So have them be efficient in this lab with the knowledge that they may be able to finish up some of those things. One part of efficiency for us will be to start the capsule stain immediately when we come into the lab, remembering that it takes a while for that milk smear to dry. If we don't allow it time to dry, it will simply roll right off the surface of the slide, leaving them with not much background to look at. Once again, same with the negative stain as the capsule stain, a very confluent purple background is essential, and that is often found most visually pleasingly on the edges of the smear preparation. So direct students to the edges when you help them with their focusing process. A quick note, we will not cover the nuances of capsules in lecture. I've saved that for lab. So when you're reviewing the functions of a capsule, bear in mind that you are the first person to inform students about these things. I broadly cover it in the guise of glycocalyces when I'm talking about it in lecture, but I do not go into the specific capsule details. I also do not cover the specific details of endospore formation, of germination, of activation. So these are things that are coming to the students largely for the first time. We have covered the sort of historical look of how Robert Koch did use his postulates to connect Bacillus anthracis with anthrax, but we haven't talked expressly about endospore formation. There are some nice additional things to add to your lecture regarding some of the forms of anthrax and maybe how that might be of interest as you're going through some of the coverage of endospores. I also want to make note that Lab 5 is the dilution lab, and that'll be happening a week from Tuesday. So it's very important that we get students jazzed about doing these dilution problems and thinking about them ahead of time. So if we can get them thinking about reading Lab 5 ahead of time, as hard as that might be with the knowledge that an exam is coming up, let's try to encourage them nonetheless. Okay, quick things on Canvas that I want to show you that we found. I think I've had a chance to talk to most of you about SpeedGrader. If I haven't, let me know and we'll do that actually in lab, but I will show you a couple of things here. So remember that all of the quizzes, all of the pre-labs that we're making are visible under the quizzes button. But also remember that students, because notice that this is light gray, students cannot see these the way that we can. So we need to make sure to put them under the modules tab when we finish and publish them. So go ahead and scan down to whatever pre-labs you know that you've finished and are published. So I don't know, I'm going to click on pre-lab 4 section 13. This would be Amanda's and Trevor's and Jen's lab. And let's see, this doesn't look to have been published. Let's see if it's done. Okay, it looks like it's been set to be 2.5 points. Okay, I can see one thing that needs to be done already on this. We need to make sure that the everyone else date is set for a date that has passed, because that's the only way we seem to be able to limit access to it. So let's go in here and make some edits, and I know that's at least one edit that we need to make. So I'll go ahead and set Looks like everything else is good, but I will set the everyone else date for August the 1st because, you know, that's past, and then those students should not have access to this. And I don't know that it's necessary to set the from and until dates, but we can make those August 1st too. And then it's obvious that the students who are not in your lab section will then not have access to this. So I'm hitting the big blue button, save, and we should be in business there. Now I'm going to go ahead and check your questions and make sure that they're all ready to go. It did look like we had 2.5 points, so it looks like choose an answer below after completing the gram stain. Okay, let's just show question details so I can make sure your questions are all done. Sure looks like they are. Everything looks solid. Okay, so that looks good. And so I'm going to go ahead and publish this quiz. And we'll just hit publish. And then this yellow bar will go away because we hit publish. So now it's all ready to go. So now I go to modules. And once I'm in modules, if you click over on the wheel over here, this allows you to add content. So I can go ahead here and from the quiz content, I can find it again, pre-lab 4, section 13. That's the one we just worked on. And I'll hit add item. And that should add this to the list here. Yep, pre-lab 4, section 13 is all ready to go. So hopefully that helps you out, and I hope everybody had a super, super awesome weekend, and I can't wait to see you all on Tuesday.